Someone asked me where snowmen keep their money. Would that be a snowbank? This is It Happened History.
I love the Italian people. During World War II, an Italian girl saved my life. She hid me in a cellar. It was in Toronto. I feel good. I met a wonderful doctor. He gave a guy 6 months to live. Couldn't pay his bill. Gave him another 6 months.
Tonight I would like to talk about human prehistory. Not much is really known about this period because 1. We have no written records, 2. Archaeological evidence can be confusing, and 3. We are not really sure what Earth looked like at the time. On top of this, we have a massive gap in interpretation, with our YouTube users being humans that are relatively well-fed, relatively well-educated, living in cities and knowing what the world looks like, trying to interpret the actions of people who did not live in cities, did not know what the world looked like, and did not know when or if their next meal would be filling or poisonous. Human prehistory lasted from probably 100,000 BC to 12,000 BC when we start finding the first written records in cities. It's a huge data set, and the window is 10 times that of recorded history. So yes, it is possible that humanity developed airline travel in, say, 40,000 BC, only to fall back into a stone age when aliens bombed us from space in 40,001 BC. So there I've fulfilled the ancient alien trolls. Anyway, for the purpose of this video, I am only going to look at the more recent human prehistory from 20,000 BC to 10,000 BC. The first people need to understand about this time period is that Earth looked and felt a lot different. Since about 30,000 BC, Earth had been under the grip of an ice age and the various snowmen that enforced an ice age. Most of the northern hemisphere was uninhabitable, and much larger coastal regions existed all around the globe. Lower sea levels meant that land bridges connected many islands to the mainland, and a richer continental shelf meant that fishing was drastically better than it is today. That mainland was far more primal than the Earth of today. Earth's biomes were full of megafauna, and many more dangerous animals and insects. I say many more because we really don't know how many, as humans have been incredibly efficient at killing off or breeding out animal species that might pose a threat to us over the years. Without centuries of lumberjacking, mining, and engineering, the natural features of Earth would be harsher. Mountains would have been more impassable, rivers and watersheds more prone to flooding, forests would be thicker, and everywhere else would be more wild and more harsh to humans. Humanity looked about the same as it does today, except perhaps with harder features and more signs of wear and a violent lifestyle. Humans would have lived in small bands of 500 to 700, with the largest bands being perhaps up to 4,000 total people. This number is rather set based on the amount of people nomadic herds of game can provide, and that local water tables without the advent of irrigation can support. In the tropics, the numbers might have gone much higher to perhaps 10 to 15,000, but that would be the extent of human populations in one place. These populations would have been spread across tens of thousands of miles in every direction with no real understanding of where or who was out there. The primary problem faced by our ancestors was how to find food and how to find mates. Today, finding either is as easy as getting a job and going to the grocery store, or going on Match.com and going on 75 dates. But our ancestors would have had more problems. Before agriculture, humans had to rely on hunting, gathering, and fishing for all calories needed to survive. And all of these are very labor-inefficient ways of finding food. Game animals are fast and hard to track, while wild edibles are often available a few months out of the year. Many wild edibles are also poisonous, and that's a kind of problem if you eat the poison berries first and die. Fish are a great source of calories, and expanded coastal zones would have been rich in fisheries. But Dorothy can probably best attest to how hard fishing can be. Finding mates was equally as hard. In small groups, nearly everyone is related within 2 generations, and the genetic problems innate to interbreeding would have educated early humans that breeding with relatives was not a very good thing. This meant that the only way to find mates was by trading with other bands, or in humanity's stupid style, waging war on other bands. Still, the number of people who actually were able to procreate would have been small, perhaps 2 in 5, which is the main reason 7.5 billion people today are all remarkably well related. Keep in mind that in order to procreate, you would have had to survive a very hostile environment, then been of a sufficient position to even earn a mate. All of this was made worse by the fact that early humans had no idea what Earth actually looked like or who lived on it. Many people never ranged further than 30 miles, even if they were nomadic, and there were no maps or guides. Mountains and rivers acted like essential total barriers that kept people in small geographic regions. Everywhere people went, they would have been overwhelmed by the scale of the Earth, and very well could have believed that other races lived on the Earth with humanity. One of the main misnomers about the prehistoric era is that humans had to deal with disease in the same way that they do today. While infectious disease did trouble our ancestors, it wasn't as much of a problem. Keep in mind, humans lived in very small, isolated groups, which effectively quarantined most diseases. Moreover, humans were closer to their primal core, which means theoretically that their immune systems should have been far stronger at resisting diseases. In addition, the diseases they faced, while virulent, would not have had centuries to mutate and to adapt to kill humans. So humans would have had a much better time when it came to disease. Sure, they would have died of cancer and all the other maladies that people naturally die of. But the massive disease epidemics that would come with civilization were not present. An irony, since civilization brought so much other positives to early man. Daily life for our ancestors would have been difficult. Ever since humanity mucked it up in the garden and kind of gave the finger to God, they were forced to toil on the earth, and the earth is a very harsh mistress. Moreover, while humans are incredibly intelligent, we're not particularly physically strong or sturdy compared to other animals. Indeed, our children only are able to be productive after 5 years, whereas a wildebeest is able to walk and run after 5 minutes. Living in this world would have been difficult. There would have been so much unknown for these people to handle. Then again, that's me in the 21st century interpreting how and what they acted. I fully expect that our ancient ancestors, living before the advent of civilization, probably fell into the same traps that we did. They made mistakes, they did the wrong thing over and over again, they subscribed to ridiculous superstitions, they ate things they shouldn't, they were lazy, etc. Moreover, it is in this prehistory that we also see where men started asserting their dominance over women in human social systems. Regardless of some notable champions of feminism and the recent emancipation and participation of women in both the economy and the workforce in most human societies, it's hard to argue that human history has been anything but male-dominated in 90% of cultures, at least I have heard of. Prehistoric communities were not affluent enough to have gender roles, but they were likely still male-dominated. Several theories have been floated about why this dominance initially happened, but really the best one has to do with childbirth. Before modern science, women unfortunately die during childbirth at a rate of 11 to 15%. This happens regardless of who you are or your position in society. So a female chieftain or a female chieftain's heir could just as easily die as anyone else. Over time, this would really have slanted things towards male leaders, as female leaders would have had to produce heirs just as readily as male counterparts, but die off at a rate 15 times the rate that men die off during childbirth, which is less than 1%. Without leaders, it's no surprise that eventually men might have gotten the upper hand in the battle of the sexes. All of this said, humanity made it work for them. Over 10,000 years, humans were able to survive an ice age and build a population sufficient enough to start civilizations in several places around the globe. Along the way, they colonized 6 of the 7 major continents and most of the islands on this planet, using either land bridges or sealskin boats to travel the oceans. It's a really amazing feat. There's so much we don't know still. During this period, somehow a race of pygmies made it all the way to Hawaii, which is 7,000 to 9,000 nautical miles away from anywhere. Other pygmies also made it to New Zealand, and a whole host of ancient structures were built that predate civilization that we don't really know what they were for, how they were built, or how humans that didn't have pulleys could make them. They probably had pulleys. It's not that hard to develop a pulley. In the end, this was our probably most confusing part of our history, and certainly the walk through history we're going to have. We have very few sources, so unfortunately I'm not going to have a good citation page. Not that I have any citation page. But this period is really important to understand, and it's certainly fascinating. There's tons of books that I'll put in the description down below that you can read. We can't really link much what happened here to the future, which is something I'll do often. And the reason for that is it's simply so far away and so distant that we have no real connections to what's happening today. Except for probably the biggest connection ever, which is that humans domesticated dogs and probably cats during this period. Well, maybe not cats, but definitely dogs. And certainly me and Dorothy are glad for that arrangement. Thank you and God bless.